So if you've ever seen Big, of course, you know that it's this kid who makes a wish and becomes big. He looks like Tom Hanks. It was made in '87, and like I said, Barry Sonnenfeld was involved with this, and there's a scene where Tom Hanks is calling his mother and pretending to be his own kidnapper, because earlier in the film he tried to talk to his mother, but she didn't believe him when he said that he was actually her son, of course, and so she ran him out of the house because she thought that he was a robber or something. And so he wanted her to know that he was okay, but he didn't know how to do it. So he just calls her up and claims that he's the kidnappers and that he's just fine. And she's like, "Well, can I talk to him?" And he's like, Well, no, he's too busy. You can't talk to him because, of course, he sounds like a grown man, and there's no way she can really, talk to him. So so instead, what he does is he says, "Well, I'll ask him something that only he would know, and then I'll tell you, and then you'll know that he's okay." So she says, "What was ask him what his favorite, or ask him what song I sang to him when he was little." And so embarrassingly, he starts singing Memories, which is the same song that the Tick and Arthur are singing in an elevator sequence in one of the episodes of the live-action Tick. It's an episode called The Big Leagues, and they're in the elevator and they hear it playing in elevator music, and then they just start kind of singing it together, and it's nearly the exact same gag. And I'm wondering if there's any way that's a coincidence that Barry Sonnenfeld was involved in both of these projects and that same gag was used in both. Anyway, thanks for bearing with me, but I thought that was funny. Big is a fun movie. It's one of those things where I wondered if it would still hold up now, and it does. It's a really fun movie for such an outlandish kind of idea. It actually works really well. It's got a good message, and it's also really fun. I don't know. So if you've never seen Big, you ought to watch Big. It's streaming on Netflix. Go watch that. That's a really fun movie. And it takes you back to, because it was '87, and when was there a better time for toys than 1987? That's all I'll say about Big. That and that whole movie is worth the classic scene where he and the owner of the toy company are playing the piano with their feet. That's a great movie. Television. Okay, wanted to talk about Stan Lee's Superhumans, because I watched the first episode of that last Thursday, and I wasn't especially keen on the show. I decided to watch it just to see what it was, but here's what I thought that show was going to be. It's on the History Channel, and it's Stan Lee sending a guy out, because of course, Stan Lee is not traveling the world looking for superhumans, but he's sending a guy out to do this for him, and what I thought it was going to be was them finding people who were extraordinarily good at something, but not necessarily superpowered. And I was really pleasantly surprised by the people they managed to find for the show. The show was extraordinary. I couldn't believe who they found, and how well they proved that the abilities they had weren't simply people who were really good at something, but people who had abilities that really are kind of nearly superpowers. And in one case, I'll say actually it is a superpower. I'll mention all four of them. I don't know if you can actually go back and watch that on the internet or anything, or if they've been reshowing it or whatever. But I'll briefly mention the people they had and the powers they had, because they're really very cool. And again, these are real people that they actually found. The first one is a guy in India who has the ability to put a really high electrical current through him and power things with it, and it doesn't hurt him. And so they had him do a couple different things where, like, he puts his he actually plugs himself into a light socket and powers a light bulb. And then they go farther and they have him actually power a hot plate, which doesn't sound especially impressive until you find out just how much voltage you need to power a hot plate. And they make a big deal out of how this would kill any normal human being, but he's actually able to power it. And it was astounding. And then what they do, and this is what's really neat, is they try to figure out why these people are actually able to do what they can do, and if there's something physiologically different about them. And what they discovered was that, and this is so comic book, I was really surprised by this. What they discovered was that his molecular structure really is different. There's something different about his skin that can actually withstand these electrical currents better than normal people's skin, and it has something to do with the fact that when he was a kid, and I don't know what the circumstances were, but he sadly tried to take his own life, and he went up onto like a big what do you call it, like a big voltage plant thing. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I forget what it's called. But anyway, he went on top of something that had a lot of voltage in it, and he electrocuted himself, and it didn't kill him, and it apparently somehow made his skin capable of taking electrical current. I was like, how extremely comic book is that for like a superhero or even a supervillain origin? Like, and of course, these people aren't like using their powers as superheroes or whatever, but I'm just saying, like that sounded so comic book. Then the next guy was the really impressive one for me, and they called him the human calculator, and he has the ability to calculate things faster than pushing buttons on a calculator. And they proved that he's not just memorizing things. No matter what they asked him, he could do it. It's not just multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. It's anything. He can do square roots. He can do calculus. He can do anything. And you just ask him something, and his brain just does it. It's effortless. And he's a math teacher, and of course he knows his math, but he's able to calculate these things to the decimal point, which means that, this guy, if he wanted to, could calculate all of pi probably, and it's not just the fact that he can do it, but it's the speed at which he does it. And they discovered that with this guy, apparently the part of the brain that usually does math somehow in his brain has moved to an area that usually deals with motor function. And that area of the brain is required to move more quickly because it usually is involved in motor function. And they think that that's why he's able to calculate things so quickly. And then the other two, they had a guy who was blind and had figured out a way to use sonar to get around. He actually uses like bat type sonar, and he clicks his tongue, and he's able to tell how far away things are from him based on the clicks. And then the last guy was like this amazing strongman, and again, I figured he'd just be like this really strong guy, but it's another thing that at first glance seems to defy physics, because he's short and doesn't weigh a whole lot, and yet he's able to lift hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and he can like bend steel with his bare hands, and it's crazy. And once again, there's something different about his molecular structure, and I don't remember exactly what it was with that guy that made him able to do this, but they had him bend a stainless steel frying pan, and it, like in half. Well, not like break it in half, but like bend it down the middle, right? And then they had him the craziest thing he did was toward the end. He was able to grab the back of. Oh no, I know what it was. They tied like a rope around him, and they had a motorcycle drive really fast, and he was able to hold the motorcycle back just by like standing there and pulling on this cord. So anyway, that was really cool, and I highly recommend that series. I don't know. I went ahead and spoiled all four of those for you just because I don't know how easy it is to get that, and I also don't know if they're going to re-show it and stuff, and I don't know. I didn't know if you'd even be interested in trying to look at it and see it, but do keep watching it, because if they're able to find 3 or 4 of these people every week that are as interesting as those, I'm going to be really surprised, because that doesn't seem to me like a series that would have a lot of legs, just because I figured they'd pick one person a week and stretch it as far as they could, but no, it was 4 in an hour, and every one of them, I would almost call 4 of those superpowers. Last thing I wanted to talk about. So I've been going back and watching some Lois and Clark. And speaking of trying to see if things hold up from when you were a kid, this is a show that really doesn't. When I was a kid, I was a Superman fan, and so I watched Lois and Clark, and I guess I just liked it because it was Superman. Because going back and watching it again, boy, it's not really Superman. It's Superman is just it's just sort of the excuse for a soap opera that can be put in prime time. I guess is the best way I can put it. There are things about it that are fun, but it's so corny in a lot of places, and like, I'm not annoyed that the show is so often played up for comedy so much as the fact that the comedy's not funny. Like, there's just a lot of really bad jokes in the show. And I also think it has some of the worst episode titles of anything I've ever seen. Like, Lois and Clark was notorious for having, more than one episode where they tried to marry off Lois and Clark, and then something bad happened, and then they had to put it off for later. And the episode where they finally do actually get married is called something along the lines of, "We swear to God we're not kidding." I'm like, that's an eloquent episode title. Like, really? Like, you're breaking the fourth wall with your episode title and coming out we're the writers and we're sorry we kept doing this to you. I don't know. It's really odd. And then an episode called Lord of the Flies, Flys, and that was one of the episodes in the New Krypton arc. And when I say New Krypton, don't get excited, because it's not like the New Krypton we just got in the comics. I mean, it's just so generic. When they try to do comic book stuff, it's really generic. They don't borrow enough from the source material, and once again, it just seems like too much of an excuse to do a romance, and not even an especially good romance, because what they'll do is they'll try to have a show that looks like the stakes are really high, and they've got this guy named this was the end of 3 into the beginning of season 4. They got this guy named General Nor, who is from New Krypton, and he's a Kryptonian, and he's basically like General Zod. And once again, I don't know why they couldn't just use Zod, but anyway, and he comes in and he's trying to take over Earth, and they try to play it up like this really big epic thing, right? And then every so often they have to stop and have Lois and Clark talk about their relationship. And I don't think this is just me being a male comic book reader finding this irritating. It's not good storytelling, because it gets in the way, as opposed to actually being the interesting part of the show. So anyway, I don't know. I'm not saying don't watch Lois and Clark. There are, like I said, there's some fun things about it, and I like some of the casting in it. Believe it or not, that's actually my favorite Perry White, and I like the people who play Clark's parents. And I don't think Dean Cain is a bad Superman, although I wish that there was more of a I wish he differentiated a little bit more between his Clark Kent and his Superman, because it makes everybody around him seem a lot dumber for not being able to figure out that he's Superman, since his Clark and his Superman act nearly identical. I think. But I don't know. Anyway, they've finally got that all streaming on Netflix also. So if you want to, and you've never watched Lois and Clark, you might check it out and see if you get a kick out of it. But I don't know. I remembered it being more of an epic show when I was a kid, and I felt a little disillusioned going back and rewatching some of it. But anyway, that's it for the Captain's Log. Thanks a lot for listening, and hope you enjoyed it, and hope it was informative.